Okay, so greetings everyone. I hope you're all doing really well. And I welcome all of you to yet another session, which is going to mark since we are drawing closer to the end of our summer research program. So so this session has been arranged in order for young researchers to share their researches before our external guest, whom I'll be introducing shortly. So as a way of introduction, my name is Qazi Zulkarnain, and I am the founding director of Youth Center for Research. So to introduce YCR, especially for those who are joining in for the first time, and since the session will be put on different platforms, so for external audience as well. So YCR as an IT and organization, was conceived in the year 2019. The basic philosophy of Youth Center for Research is to inculcate active research among young people in order to add substance to their advocacy by building their knowledge around issues of national and global significance. At YCR, we believe that informed young people will be in a better position to hold societal relevance for civic and political participation, and also for leadership in policy discourse, both in international and national institutional and power apparatus. So based on this philosophy, YCR runs a flagship program every year, and it's a summer research program, which was for the first time convened in 2019. And this year it was an international summer research program. We have participants joining in from 12 different countries. So the research program was a transnational exercise in which young people were researching on themes which were drawn from SDGs, that is Sustainable Development Goals. And out of those out of those 6 themes, 2 of the themes will be presented upon today. And those themes are corruption and political integrity. And the second is gender equality and social inclusion. So these 2 themes are actually cross-cutting issues because every development aspect, every development issue, and development per se generally has a gender lens. In the same way, we are aiming for 17 different sustainable development goals. And we know that if there is corruption or lack of individual or institutional integrity, that too will impact development as a whole. So with that being said, I would now like to introduce our guest for today, who will also be in adjudicating the presentations by our young researchers. So we have with us today Mr. Umar Nadeem, who is a fellow at Tabadlab, and he has extensive experience of working with the government, multilateral organizations, corporations on public policy and governance issues. And his work experience spans across Asia, Europe, and Africa. His particular expertise lies in data analytics, transparency, governance, service delivery, and digital government. As academically, he pursued his undergraduate degree from Lahore University of Management Sciences, which is one of the reputed universities in Pakistan. And he completed his master's in public policy from Blavatnik School of Government at University of Oxford. So I really welcome you, Umar, on board, and thank you very much for giving us the opportunity of having you here and taking time out from your busy schedule. So I would really welcome you, and I'll give the floor to you for your opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Zulkarnain. A pleasure to be here, and great to see so many young people from different countries participating in the program. I think these 2 topics are of ever increasing importance, both in the public sector, in the political sphere, and even in the private sector or corporations and the social enterprise space. And not enough importance can be laid out on them. One affects systems and institutions at large, and the other affects pretty much the fabric of how we develop societies and economies going forward. And the most interesting part for me is not that these have been drawn from SDGs, but the fact that there has been a structured thought process on actually researching aspects of these topics, because the growing evidence pool around topics of interest and the need for innovation, more timely evidence, research, data, and fresh perspectives on this, particularly from the lens of youth, make this a very, very interesting and important exercise. And I think that the importance of evidence-informed policy decisions cannot be emphasized enough in a world when the landscape is shifting at a very fast pace. I think COVID-19 and the global pandemic has taught us that nothing can be predicted, and we need to be prepared for unexpected events, circumstances, situations that could be very, very global and disruptive. So how do we pivot from situations like these? How do we prepare ourselves and make ourselves more resilient? None of those will be possible without having systems in place which generate and produce high quality evidence that is fed into the decision-making cycle. So really looking forward to the presentations and the discussion today. And again, happy to be here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, right. So thank you so much, Umar, for your introductory remarks. So with that, we'll simply dive into today's session, and I would like to introduce the teams who will be presenting. So I'll first introduce the first team that will go first. So we have corruption and political integrity. I can see all of the participants are here already. So this team has a bunch of 5 researchers joining in from 5 different countries. So we have Talha Ahmed Sheikh, who is joining us from Pakistan. We have Moniki joining us from Kenya. Then we have Fedor from Russia, Amanda from Nigeria, and Muntaha Kamran from India. And they will be presenting today, which is a collaborative and group exercise. So with that, I will give the floor to you, and you can you can share your screen and begin the presentation.
Hello, hello, hello. Thank you all. I'll share my screen in a second. Do you see it?
Yes.
Okay, good. Then let's start. Thank you all for joining. Our team, Corruption and Political Integrity, from 5 different countries. We want to present to you the topic of our research, which is the effect of governmental control over media on elite coherence and corruption. So corruption is a really widespread phenomenon, and I think all of you have felt it in your life, affecting your country and maybe personally you or your relatives. And my friend here, Talha, will tell you about the research problem.
Hello guys. Our first research problem, which we figured out while we were doing our research, is media houses are growing a lot in all dimensions, whether it's a print media, digital media, or a broadcast media. But we have seen changes in ways of corruptions also. So we have seen a new media houses coming with the different kind of techniques and all to catch all those political corruptions which are being made by the political leaders, but they have come up with a new solution or new way to do a corruption and all. The second research problem talks about how expansion of media has its both upside as well as downside. If we talk about upside being the freedom of speech and access to the information to most of us, while downside, our political integrity is being corrupt. So this is the problem, which create problem for the media houses too. Most of the time, the political leaders make a collaboration with the media houses to stop their corruption being displayed to the people. And the third research problem, which we have figured it out or which we have find, our research analysis is based comprehensively on 5 countries lying on 2 big continents on the globe, but we have conclusively drawn and assess a correlation, connection between media, freedom of corruption, and erosion of political integrity within such regions. So these are the 3 main research problems which we all have come up collectively. Thank you.
Thank you. And here's our rationale for this work. We've researched the literature existing on the topic, and we found that there is a gap and between among the existing literature, and gap, which is the effect of media ownership on the corruption. There are works about media, there are works about corruption and the correlation, and Monique will tell you more about that. And we just want to talk about the cases of anti-corruption methods and how they work in our respective countries. And we want to analyze, we want to present you with the analysis of these countries by 5 principles of citizen engagement by Transparency International. So there was a fine work in 2019 concerning the principles of engagement of citizens in anti-corruption mechanisms, and Transparency International found 5 of them that are relevant in all societies. First of them is relevance. So the mechanism shall be relevant to the people and to the society they live in. So the culture and the existing mechanisms working there, then it should be safe for citizens, and it should be credible and responsive, and finally accessible. Yeah, if it's not accessible, it doesn't work. Monique? Okay, Monique has connection troubles. Well, basically, we decided to work in the framework of collective action theory, which means that only together we can make difference. So if one person acts and another person acts, it all comes up together and the change happens. Muntaha?
Yeah. And in proceeding with this research, considering the current COVID-19 pandemic, we chose secondary data research methodology using the meta-analysis method. The reason for this choice was, in our research, we have included a comparative analysis of 5 different countries: Nigeria, Kenya, Pakistan, India, and Russia. And given the current situation, collecting primary data through one-on-one interviews appears challenging. Also, matters like corruption are highly confidential, secretive, and private. Therefore, collecting authentic data is very challenging. So thus, in our assessment, reliance on the existing data was the best choice to proceed.
Thank you, Muntaha. And then Monique? I hope his connection got restored. Okay, then...
Hello everyone, my name is Monique.
Okay. Yeah, we can hear
you. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, Monique,
okay, thank you.
We can hear you. Please proceed further.
Great. My name is Monique. I'm with the group Corruption and Political Integrity. We in the collection of our literature, we realize that the authors get in the collection of our literature, we realize that the authors get into a bit of a debate, and the crux of which is the centrality of media in anti-corruption efforts. And so the debates are in 4 points: the centrality of the media; 2, the media as part of a grander collective effort; 3, the media's effectiveness limited by internal factors within media practice, such as professionalism and ethics, and as well as external factors such as media independence and access to information by the public; and 4, the centrality of human rights and human rights approaches as a crucial part to the anti-corruption efforts. As you can see from our slides, we then tried to integrate these debates in our own country realities, as we'll be sharing forward in our analysis. Thank you.
Okay, so here comes the analysis of Russia. Basically, here you can see all the 5 principles by TI, and I'll stop only on a couple points. First, the widespread phenomenon of learned helplessness, especially among the older generation, stimulates the discussion and the fight against corruption in Russia and makes the discussion irrelevant for the people. However, younger generation is less affected by the learned helplessness, and the internet makes it also relevant for the people. The safety aspect is not well developed in Russia, and both journalists and the informators get affected by the cases, by the elite officials, and credibility is also affected because the elite is very coherent. It means everybody knows each other. The networking is really good in Russia, but it's not good for the corruption. Anti-corruption, because everybody can call their friend and basically do whatever they want. Okay. And accessibility, internet improves the accessibility. However, not all the regions of our big country are covered with internet access. And the television, which is mostly owned by elites, is left there. Now, Monique will tell you about the analysis of Kenya.
Thanks, Fedor. So in Kenya, in the analysis of the Kenyan reality, taking a human rights approach, we came to the conclusion that the access to information and the freedom of expression by the media and access to information by the public, they facilitate the complementing of the collective action mechanisms against corruption, as has been mentioned prior. And second, we realized that the freedom of the media in their active expression, their active involvement in dissemination of information through the freedom of expression laws allows citizen access to information, which then leads to better accountability, which is necessary for democracy, which then facilitates better involvement of the citizens in anti-corruption efforts, which is complementary of the Transparency International principles of access and relevance. Access being accessed by the citizens through the media dissemination efforts, and relevance being the channels that the media uses. The analysis in adopting the human rights approach then centralizes the citizens' human rights, human rights access to information, as well as the freedom of expression, and finally the media freedom. Thank you.
And now Amanda will tell you about the analysis of Nigeria.
Okay, good morning. So I'll be briefly talking about the analysis of Nigeria, considering that Nigeria has actually practiced different kinds of government, and this presently affects the media in terms of their confidence in documenting corruption in the country. So sorry, it was coming. So I'll be talking about the relevance. The media doesn't actually fully document the true stories or corruption in the country or per state due to fear of the administration, considering that most administration, the federal system of administration, the president and the people into power were once from the military regime. So most times they kind of share corruption not in the full light because of fear of maybe being like it's a form of a media guiding where the media is very limited in terms of sharing the relevant information and also showing transparency to the public. Then as regards for safety, the media houses are not safe, like I said, in disseminating their work. because of having to document what hurts the government and what not hurts the government. So in overall of this, the public doesn't fully trust the media because they only share what the government wants to hear and not what the corruption is in true form. Then in accessibility, we notice now that because we get our data from secondary, it's a form of we get the data secondary. The public actually collects information or news from blogs rather than from media houses because the media houses do not get to disseminate the right information on corruption.
Thank you, Amanda. And Talha will tell you quickly about the Pakistan situation.
Okay. Freedom of media played a vital role in controlling the corruption in Pakistan, especially if we talk about the Pakistani economy. We have seen many examples of it. When one of the Pakistan Prime Minister got his name in Panama Papers, one of the most famous scandal which come out back in 2016 or 15 around the world. So a case is being opened in a Pakistan Supreme Court, which in the end found him guilty and he need to resign from his post. So we have seen the examples how media can play their role in preventing corruption in any society, whether it's Pakistan or India or Kenya or Russia. We can have these kind of examples around the world. Thank you.
Okay, so now to sum it all up, we will provide you with our policy recommendations based on the collective, and some recommendations are individual for the countries and some will work for all the countries that we mentioned. Okay, so Moniki proposed the creation of electoral laws requiring that require media owners and their affiliates to declare their assets before running for office. And then I know Talha proposed all those fundings to be declared and be open access so that anyone could see them. The adoption of beneficial ownership rules allowing the audit of who are the owners of media houses and who are the stakeholders. If Amanda can talk about the Nigeria proposals.
Okay, sorry, my network is actually giving me issues. So we made a couple of recommendations and we are actually calling for the media independence, where they get to document anti-corruption, even corruption measures across the 36 states in Nigeria and like the 8 geopolitical zones. So one of the imperative recommendations is for media houses to document true stories that shares the right information to the public, because it's the public is dependent on them, and unfortunately the media has lost its credibility in the country. So in all, we are actually calling forth for independence of the media houses to document true stories and also to have some fact checkings. There are less fact checkings in the Nigerian context, especially when it comes to holding government credible and to foster transparency.
Thank you, Amanda. Muntaha and Talha, please.
Okay, so I can do it early. The policy recommendation which I have given in context with the Pakistani Pakistan research papers which we have done, or which are the findings of us. So the first one is the funding which the member of parliament receive in times of election. We under the new law, first we need to go through the proper scrutiny from where funds. So we need to have a proper record For example, if some of the media houses are supporting one of the specific political parties, so we need to make a scrutiny of why they were funding them. So they, for example, some of the political parties are being funded by the local media houses, and then they usually get the all media the all media paid up contents to for themselves. So we need to work on this, and we need to find a proper new rules and regulations to control that and keep that in record. Another law which restricts news companies from funding, it's pretty much same, new news companies from funding political figures in times of elections in order to avoid biased news being reported. Muntaha, now can you present for India?
Yeah. So, like we said, media plays a strong role as a watchdog of society. However, like poor working conditions and remuneration of journalists are the issues which are to be addressed, because this could impede the effective working of media as a class. Reporting should be made with the aim of raising awareness among the people so that the opinion of citizens becomes stronger and can fight effectively against corruption. We need strong laws to restrict corrupt practices. Like in India, we have Jan Lokpal, we have ombudsman, we have right to recall, right to reject referendums on core issues, fast track courts where media is involved as one of the parties. So in case of a dilemma, journalists should be careful about how far they should get close to a politician or a corrupt person or an elite group, in order to not compromise with their work so as not to be influenced by inappropriate hospitality. They should adhere to their code of ethics. And also, what's very important is that media organizations need to employ experts in the area of law, economics, commerce, accounting, etc., to have strong evidences to cover corruption. Media and corruption fighters need to work hand in hand to facilitate each other effectively. It's like, including extensive research on the corruption by the journalist with respect to the scam and how much corruption caused the local economy, so that they can categorize those corruption scams which are required to be covered extensively as compared to others. For example, India, we saw major scams like for um 3G scam. There was in fact the Rafale deal scam, and also we need more experts in those areas so that we can categorize the scams, and then we can effectively research, then journalists can effectively research on that scam and create a strong public opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Muntaha. So three policy recommendations for Russia are to lower the maximum wage or to which a person is eligible to take public authority positions, so that the overturn of power would be faster, and to create a law that would thwart the political elites owning media channels, so that the information would be less subjective and more objective towards corruption. And finally, all the money that sponsors political figures and entities should be listed in an open online platform to ensure the transparency and integrity of people who rule the countries. So thank you all for attention. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask us.
With that, I would request Umar, if you could please comment on the presentation and anything that you would want to ask them. And if anyone generally has any question, you can pose your questions as well, and we'll get to you after Umar is done. Ji.
Thank you, everyone. That was a very interesting topic of discussion and a good effort at the presentation. I'll just quickly cover some of the main points of analysis around this and then move on to some questions that I have. I think the topic was really interesting and relevant, especially in these times when, in addition to the pandemic, we have an infodemic, and you know, sort of the role of media and both traditional and social is becoming more important, particularly in the political processes that follow. So I think the topic was very interesting. Um, the approach mentioned using secondary data as the primary source of analysis, and it would have been good to have some of that data being reflected on the slides in the analysis. So, you know, when you base research on secondary data, it would be great to have some of those numbers and data points reflected in the findings from that analysis. So that would have added more perspective and depth to the analysis that you presented. Um, uh, and in terms of the overall structure of the presentation, I felt that it was a little too texty. So, you know, my preference is always to have less text and more information presented in a way that's visually easy to consume during the short time that you're presenting. So just some tips on trying to focus on that. In terms of the content, I think it was a great effort. Just out of interest and curiosity, I mean, how does the group see the intersection and interaction of traditional media with social media and the emerging space for interactions across different platforms and new sources of information and sort of information dissemination coming up? Is that something that was part of your discussion or sort of one of the tangents to the research as to how the traditional media and the emerging and social media now intersect and are kind of creating a new fuzzy space?
Okay, so it is a discussion for Russia, I can say definitely, because well, most of the traditional media are owned by the political figures, and the internet is kind of a free space. However, there is a frightening tendency of people getting real jail sentences for posts in social media sites such as Kentucky, which is popular in post-Soviet space. And yeah, basically there is a law that also being used, which is accusation of public official and slander. And anytime a person accuses a public official of something, even if they have evidence, they are being sued with this law. If anyone from our team wants to add, then yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I can add to that. It's very much similar in India as well. We have like the traditional media houses, most like the News 18 channels. They are owned by this rich businessman, and he controls most of the media houses. So we have to rely more on social media. However, recently laws were passed that that says like if anyone talks about any politician or talks about any government policy, they are labeled as terrorists. It's the UAPA law. So if anyone posts any picture on social media or anyone says anything against the against the politicians, uh, laws are being made that that actually allow them to send them to jails. So basically even social media is under the scrutiny, and there is not much freedom even with the social media these days in India.
Right. I think we have a question from Abdul Mumin, and yeah, so you have the floor. You can ask the question.
Yes, thank you so much. My name is Abdul Mumin. I'm from the Youth and Political Engagement team. I would like to ask a question and also make a comment. So in UK, there was a minister that was appointed at a point in time, and he owned a media house. He was an editor of a newspaper. So he said he was going to continue working in his firm and as well as taking part in the government. So I do not think, in my own view, that owning a media house has to interfere with your work in government. It has to do with the values that the person possesses and as well as the values of the society. So also, I would like to say something from my end that I see that is prevalent in African nations. which is the fact that most people, especially the fact that Africa has witnessed a lot of military rule. So when people retire from the military, they get into government, but they still retain their military escorts. And when you're in government through politics, it means that you are going to be compromising the military. So when you have a politician who has a military escort, it means that the escort will be used to do some of the political jobs, which is very wrong and is affecting the political integrity in African nations. So I don't know if you have any comments to make on that.
Okay, yes, thank you so much for this contribution. We see this actually presently still happening in Nigeria as the context. So, and this has actually facilitated the fear of the media exercising their rights, number one, and exercising their duties. You know, like we said earlier, the media doesn't document the full story of corruption in the country for fear of being held, because now we even have a present issue. There are two journalists, major journalists, that are still being they're still missing in the country because they were investigated journalists, where they get to document the truth and holding the government accountable. So these are the, in our recommendation, we talked about the independence of the media, having the media to exercise their full responsibility and document all these things for the public to know.
Okay, with that, I think, so Umar, do you have anything further to add, or should we move towards the second presentation?
Just two quick comments. I think the inclusion of the discussion on open data is really important. And I think that's something that has the potential to really transform the dynamics of how media interactions, use of information and data and accountability intertwine. So that's definitely one of the strands to focus on a lot. And then second, there's been a discussion on the inaction of new laws. And I just want to highlight that laws is just the first step of the process. It's really the implementation of those laws and the loopholes or the ways to bypass those laws which need to be ensured and controlled and made airtight. So whenever we talk about laws or regulations, their implementation in the true letter and spirit is really what's more important than just having those laws in place. So just a couple of points to keep in mind while thinking about this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, the presenters, and also thank you very much, Umar, for your valuable comments. And with that, we will move towards the next presentation. And the group who will be presenting is education in gender equality and social inclusion. So altogether, the team has 3 members. Mariam Ayub, she's joining from Pakistan, then Helen from Kenya, and Imtiaz from Pakistan. So it's up to you how you have decided as to who will be presenting. If all of you are presenting, that's fine. And if someone, if it's 1 or 2 are presenting, that's also up to you. So I'll leave the floor and you can share your screen whenever you're ready, please. Yeah, so Helen, are you sharing the screen?
I'm trying. Ahmed, can you share it, please? Ahmed, are you online?
Yes.
Okay, let me see. Can you share your screen, please?
Give me a minute.
Okay. No, I'm not screen sharing. Wait. Okay, so thank you very much. So that's our introduction screen. So we have Ahmed. Ahmed comes from Pakistan, and there's Mariam, and there's myself. So we chose to join YCR and to do this particular topic because we're both interested in it, and we're also inspired by our environment. That is the things we see on a day-to-day basis on our surroundings. So next slide, please. Okay, so in our research problem, we wanted to establish whether there is a nexus between lack of education and gender inequality in the workforce in rural Sindh, Pakistan. Right, so we come from different countries and you're probably wondering why we chose this particular area. So on our first point, we see that Pakistan ranks third last. That's number 151 on the global gender index gap. And then it's also described as the world's worst among the world's worst performing countries in education. That's because 22.5 million in 2015 children were recorded to be out of school. And then also rural Sindh is faced by poverty and experiences like really high numbers of children out of school. So next slide, please. Okay, so on our research questions, so just a minute. Okay, so our first question was, how does lack of education opportunities affect engagement of girls in the workforce? That's in Sindh, Pakistan. And then we also wanted to see the gaps existing in the national and global policies for education of girls. So the overall aim is to come up with, or rather to influence effective policies. And the specific aim is to investigate the connection between education and gender inequality. That's because it hinders the girls' progress generally in terms of accessing opportunities and also being in the workforce. Next slide. And so why that research question, right? So first of all, many years of schooling also means girls will marry later and they'll be less vulnerable to cases of domestic violence, as already there is in some regions in Pakistan. And then also there's a connection between gender equality and with all the other SDGs, and the connection with eliminating poverty, of which Pakistan poverty rate was 24.3%. That's 24.3% of the population are living below the poverty line. And then also education is a human right. And then so the topic gender equality, if it's achieved, it's associated with like achieving economic growth of any country. So next slide. So onto our methodology, right? So we had literature review and we collected secondary data from Pakistan Bureau of Statistics, World Bank, and UNICEF. And so, is someone speaking? Okay. So and so to the advantages, I just want to say we couldn't collect primary data on this because of the current situation and our different locations. But then there was an advantage of various platforms having conducted this research before and having numbers. As much as we are limited to the fact that the numbers might vary, and also we can't find like all the data online. Next slide. And so in our literature review, the critical debates that emerged, right? So there are the supply side and the demand side factors of education. This created barriers in girls' education in Pakistan, and the point is more eliminated in our speaker notes. And then also studies from in 2011 from the authors listed indicate that the parents were biased in terms of who to spend education on. So if a parent is poor, right, they will choose to spend education on the boy because the girl will get married anyway. And sometimes the girls will be forced to remain home and help in getting income to educate the boy child. And then also this gender bias portrayal in national textbooks, and also teacher behavior, right? So if the textbooks are already biased, then and the teachers are somehow biased, then this goes into their mentalities from a young age and it affects them. So next slide. Okay, so other debates included the patriarchal society the societies, the structure, and that patriarchy still exists, not just here in Pakistan, but in other areas of the world. And then even in the labor market, you notice that when women are employed, sometimes their salary is lower than that of male. So that's also limiting and discouraging to the girls. And then also their choices sometimes are restricted, like just as I've said, right, your work will go unrecognized, or your labor will be unpaid, or if it's paid, it will be less payment. Next slide. And so on our data analysis, these are just the numbers. So these are the numbers that, in case you need to refer back to the graph, you will come back to it. But this data is picked from World Bank, 1999, and Pakistan Bureau of Statistics. So 1999 comparison and 2014 comparison. So it's analyzed in the graphs in the following slide. Ahmed, please. Next slide. And so, so based on our research questions, right? So the first question, we wanted to establish whether there is, whether lack of education limits their engagement in the workforce. So looking at this graph, right? So this is on my left side, it's Pakistan women in the labor force in 1999, and on the other side, it's male. The light pink color represents the rural areas. That's number of no education and post-secondary. So in this case, educated meant reaching post-secondary level. And then urban areas, we have the green. So just a general view, we noticed that in both rural and urban areas, the more educated women had access to opportunities, had access to labor force opportunities compared to their uneducated counterparts. So, and also in urban areas, it's more of like, it's now a wider gap in urban areas. So it's like education is a factor. But then in rural areas, you notice the gap is not that far. You notice 19 and 27 in 1999 and 38 and 57 in 2014. But then further research, we noticed that this is because in rural areas, they're likely to take up unpaid jobs or less paid jobs because of the need to provide for their families. So this data of engagement in the workforce does not cater for the type of jobs or the amount of salaries that are paid. Next slide. And so basically, I've explained the findings, but then just going to the right side, additional data shows that in Pakistan, the male unemployment rate is twice lower than that of females. So I think these statistics are really, really worrying, right? So women still have inadequate access to the labor force. And then also the total labor force of around 61.04 million, that's in 2015. 76% were males, and females accounted for only 24% of that population. So next slide. So in slide B, we sought to just compare what goes on in rural Pakistan in general, and then Sindh province, because okay, so as much as we didn't have like the exact data that we collected ourselves, in this we just basically want to know how worse can worse get, right? So the blue represents rural Pakistan, and then the maroon is for the Sindh. So then a general conclusion from the graph, it's that in Sindh, the female labor force participation is still low and quite unpredictable, because you notice the fall in 2015, right? And then, so we also now came up with, so since the statistics are unpredictable, the statistics are worrying, so we went ahead to research now on the policies regarding female education and employment now at the provincial level. Next slide. So Ahmed will take us through.
So for what education policy is concerned, we have found policy rule from the policies of the education departments in the stipend system. The stipend system was introduced to encourage the enrollment of the girls, in particular the primary education. So they were giving the stipend of monthly stipend of 3,600 Pakistani rupees up to 10th grade. It was introduced from the 5th to 11th grade students. So this is one of the policy, some government policy to encourage the enrollment of the women and girls. The second policy we have found is the, according to Distance Civil Service Act 1973, the Taluka, division, district officers are promoted from the primary and secondary school teachers. The third policy we have found concerning to the gender inequality and education is the Sindh education budget, which was a bit increased from the 178 billion rupees to the 178 billion rupees. In this budget, the Sindh government proposed that they will build 1,500 elementary schools, 1,973 schools that will be provided basic facilities, and rehabilitation of 113 primary schools. So we have analyzed this policy for the stipend. We have analyzed this policy for the first point is the stipend system is not properly utilized because we have the figures from the economic survey of Pakistan that the literacy rate of the province decreased from 63% to 62.2%. Second policy that we have found is not working a lot is the availability of the female teachers in the rural Sindh. In rural Sindh, there is a mentality of many people because of cultural, religious, and tribal barriers that they prefer the male students, prefer their sons over daughters to get education. Even though considering this point, the Sindh government is actually failed in this regard of the availability of female teachers. As per report from the Sindh Education Management Information System report 2018, the 80% of the teaching staff in the rural Sindh is male. So parents are reluctant to send their daughters to the male teaching staff schools in rural Sindh. Third policy we have found is not working that the teachers, the taluka, district, and division education teachers are promoted from the primary and secondary school teachers. So these primary and secondary school teachers, they don't possess any kind of administrative and management skills and experience. So promoting those primary and secondary school teachers to the division, district, and taluka level is a blunder for the education because it will pave the way for the corruption, mismanagement, and for another thing we have found in the policy gaps is the high corruption rate in the Sindh government. That introduces two concepts, ghost schools and ghost teachers. Okay, ghost schools are those schools which are built only on papers. Their buildings are not available in real. And ghost teachers are those teachers who are teaching in the ghost schools. It means they are teachers, they are in the papers, but they don't go in the schools. They were not built. So monthly they get salary, and for the ghost schools, for yearly, annually, they get budget for the facilities, basic facilities. So it's still there's a lot of corruption. So for the policy recommendations, before coming to the policy recommendations, I will come to that point again. The administrative structure of the Sindh education recruitment. Those primary school teachers and secondary school teachers, which they don't possess any kind of administrative experience and management experience, they will pave the way for the corruption. They will pave the way for the mismanagement that led to the non-spending of the budget to the basic facilities in the rural Sindh, especially to the girls' primary schools. First thing, and second thing is they will affect the availability of the female teachers. Third thing, they will also lead to the ghost schools. In this whole scenario, it will increase the gender inequality as the parents, as there will be less number of female teachers, the parents will not send their daughters. And second thing is there's the less basic facilities. Parents will obviously not send their daughters. So it will somehow increases the gender inequality in regards of education in the rural Sindh. For the policy recommendations, we will suggest that the number of female teachers in the rural Sindh must be increased. Proper basic facilities should be provided, especially to the girls' schools. And anti-corruption and strict compliance policies by the government to prevent misappropriation of the funds. Fourth thing we will recommend is the according to the Sindh government, there are almost 7,000 such schools exist through the southern Pakistani province of Sindh. There are ghost schools, 7,000 ghost schools, according to the Assistant Education Minister, and selection of well-trained district and division level education officers. So as far as teachers and primary and secondary school teachers are concerned, they should be promoted in their own domain, not in the administrative roles. As far as administrative roles is concerned, they should be commissioned officers to cover the district divisional level education. And punishment should be given to the ghost teachers and those who have increased or released the fund for the ghosted schools yearly, even though they are not built. So if you have any question, you may ask.
Okay. Right. Perfect. Thank you so much, the Gender Equality and Social Inclusion team. I would now go to Umar for your comments, if you have any, on the presentation that was presented before you.
Sure. Thank you very much. I think this was a great effort. I mean, fantastically done. The presentation and the flow was really nice, very structured, very clean. The way the information was organized and printed was really easy to follow, and the right mix of text and visual. So great work on the presentation and slides itself. I think there was adequate coverage of data across. It was really helpful to sort of connect the dots and understand some of the underlying reasons. So again, good use of data. And I think that the topic is something that's been covered a lot, but always very, very relevant, and is one of the fundamental pillars of how progress and development can happen, particularly from a gender and social inclusion lens. In terms of specific questions, two things caught my eye, and I just wanted to sort of flag those. One is whenever we're looking at secondary research and data analysis, it's really important to try and understand the difference between correlation and causality, and not to confuse the two or mix the two. And that's something that everyone who's engaged in research or analysis or presenting findings should be very, very mindful of. So, you know, trends moving together or trends that seem to connect logically as causal may not necessarily be causal. So that's a very important point to keep in mind while presenting data or implying findings or implications. So the two things that kind of caught my eye was, one, any thoughts on why the literacy rate has decreased in Sindh? There was a part of the slide that was talking about a reduction in the literacy rate. And any sort of breakdown or further analysis into that? Is it because the net enrollment decreased, or is it because the population in general grew, or was there a change in approach? So that's one question. And the second question is, there was a claim on ghost schools and teachers, and, you know, having worked in Sindh with education, it would be really helpful to have references for data points like these, because I think the ghost schools problem is largely solved. They may not be functional anymore, but the problem for ghost schools is largely resolved, and pretty much for teachers too. So it's always helpful to back such facts or data points with references, so it's easy to track and monitor. So it would be great to hear some things on the literacy aspect of this. Thank you.
Oh, I want to add something. Hello?
Imtiaz, go ahead.
Yes. So thank you, sir, for commenting and for improvement of our presentation. For the ghosted school is concerned, it's not a claim. It's the figures given by a provincial education minister in 2018 provincial assembly, and they are working on it. Yeah.
Okay, and do you have any comment on any response to the comment that Umar made about the literacy rate? Because in 2015, the graph actually showed that there was a fall in the literacy rate. So any comments or justification or explanations for that, if somebody would like to highlight?
So hi, I really don't know if Ahmed has a point to say on that. But thank you for again noticing that. I think that's a great point to check. So it was basically research on the literacy rate, but we haven't digged into why it dropped. I think that's a good point raised, and something that we could actually add on after this.
Great. Umar, do you have anything else to add? Otherwise, I mean, I have some questions for you because since you're already here, I know that we are already overboard, but I would really like the opportunity to ask you some questions, I mean, connecting the topics that were discussed and also drawing from your own practical experience. So do you have any comments to make, or can I just pose my questions?
No, please go ahead.
Okay, so
I think there's
yeah.
hand.
Okay, right. So Abdul Mumin, you have the floor. You can ask your question.
Okay, thank you so much. So my question is, did you look into the possibility of um, um, digital learning? Because some of the things that reduce the literacy rate include violence in some regions. So when there's violence in a region at a particular point in time, there's tendencies for it to decrease the literacy rate in that area. Also, when you talk of digital learning, I believe at the basic education or secondary education level, it is not compulsory for all the students to go to the school, because education now is not about the building. It's about the modules that you learn and how it turns out for you. So I don't know if the team looked into the possibility of some courses that are not practical being learned from home through digital learning. So government can divert the funds into into construction massive buildings, into digital learning.
Right. So maybe.
Hi, thank you for your point. I think you have a good point concerning digital learning, yes, but then notice that we have to first of all actually do research to find why it actually dropped, then give establish that it's digital learning, then be it. But then if we also establish that we can add that point to our presentation or to our paper, then it's also good. But I suggest that we as a group first find research on the actual cause of that or some of the causes on that before suggesting like our thoughts on what's happening on other places. Thank you.
Okay.
I want to add one more thing here. This 63% decreases to 62%. It is a figure provided by Human Resource Watch 2017. So according to them, this figure was dropped because of the unutilization of the funds by this in education. As per their report, they said that there is no lack of money in this in the education department, but the unutilization of that money, that funds, leads to the decrease of the literacy rate, because that funds will go to the basic facilities for the primary school girls, and that funds will go to the recruitment of the female teachers in the rural students. So as in general, because of the lack availability of the funds and the spending of funds, that decreases.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Imtiaz, for adding that. Umar, do you want to respond to that, or should I just go forward with my question?
I mean, I just have one very broad comment. Obviously, these topics in and of themselves require a lot of in-depth discussion, analysis. But you know, education as we knew it is going to change, at least for a few years, based on the dynamics that COVID-19 has forced countries and economies and societies in. So while the point on digital learning is very valid in general, I mean, the more important point before we jump to digital learning is to understand digital access. And as we've seen in Pakistan over the last couple of months, digital access is a huge challenge. So just like access to schools it was a challenge, the digital access is another challenge that we need to solve. And it's particularly, the divide is much higher in rural areas in general, in low-income groups. Access to learning tools that can actually enable interactive learning is not really very common. So before implementing or thinking about digital learning, it's really important to understand digital access. However, distance learning is something that can now be integrated a lot more, which but also looks at analog forms of learning. So I guess there's a reset required to understand how education delivers and how outcomes can be achieved in education. But as I said, it's a topic of much more depth and breadth and discussion, and it would be unfair to just start opening that thread right now.
I think it's a very fair point. I'm trying to understand the difference between digital access and distance learning, because distance learning can take place even when there is no digital access, because some organizations I know of, for example, the Citizens Foundation, they have, especially in the context of Pakistan, have been trying different and alternative strategies in which they're trying to make the educational content accessible to children while they are at their homes, and because they cannot really come to school. So that distance learning aspect is an important aspect to look at, even if digital access is not there. So my question would be, since you are already here, so I would really want to use the opportunity. So your own personal interest has been, and your expertise lies in data analysis, in in analytics. And you have worked with the government and international organizations, and you understand governance, and you've provided solutions to governments as well. So do you, and one of the topics that was discussed today as part of the presentation was corruption, which also very much intricately links with the aspect of governance. So when we talk about corruption, when we talk about governance, there is also a whole lot of a notion of e-governance, which is also at times looked upon as a possible way of curbing corruption. But do you really think that from the context of, since you have, have experience of working in Asia, and other regions, Europe and Africa as well. So, drawing from your own experience, do you think that e-governance really is a possible solution to actually curb corruption, and to what extent can we possibly do so? Because, for example, if I can draw from my own experience, at times we do come up with, and governments do come up with digital innovations. For example, they try to replace the manual operations with digital operations. But then we also know that that is only a phase, and all the efforts kind of relapses when, for example, the government officials change, or there is less of a consistency. So do you really think, and even if there is an implementation of a system, people can at times find a way to to cut corners and to kind of break it. So do you think that e-governance can be a way to kind of curb corruption as a problem, because governance is at the, it's at the center of attaining development, which kind of feeds into everything that we are aiming for at the end of the day? So yeah.
Thank you, Zulkarnain. I would sort of step back a little and talk about understanding the context a bit more. I think to tackle any problem, what we need to understand is the nature and the essence of that problem. So if you want to, and again, just to be a little provocative, there is an inherent sort of mindset about corruption being a meta kind of a problem that is there everywhere across the government or political institutions, that affects everything in our daily lives, and that's something that needs to be solved. What we need to understand is how we define corruption, how we tag and interpret corruption, and how we identify sources of corruption. And then what parts of it need to be solved through different approaches and solutions. So corruption is not one problem that can be solved with one solution. And it's really important to understand and dissect corruption at what level, what type of corruption, corruption by whom, and what does that lead to. And so for example, corruption could range from petty extortion at a service delivery center or a point of contact, to expedite an application or a document, to massive campaign financing frauds or rigging elections, or the scope and the range of it could vary across a very, very broad and complex spectrum. So it's important to understand that solving corruption needs to be contextualized with regards to the specific use cases or the problems that we have at hand, and sort of place it in that lens. In terms of e-governance, absolutely. I think it is one of the things that can help address corruption of specific nature and size and scale. E-governance can't solve everything. And then I think what you were referring to is a difference between systems and solutions. And at times, e-governance focuses on solutions rather than systems. So for me, that's an important bifurcation. A solution is coming in and designing a software and implementing a software to automate processes, as you were suggesting. But if that's not embedded as part of a system where interactions through that solution are embedded in accountability frameworks, are embedded in governance practices, are followed up by proactive decision making, are followed up by a rich and intense use of data, has some decision making aspects to it, then all that leaves behind is the automation of a process, not really a transformation to a system that works. So e-governance is, or technology, speaking more broadly, is just an enabling tool or enabling layer. And technology in and of itself can help address problems, but it doesn't solve problems on its own. Now, what technology or e-governance or automated or digitized systems do is they reduce discretion, which means that avenues of corruption, by tweaking or modifying the process for extortion or corruption or any sort of malpractice, are limited. So they do reduce the discretion available at different stages. They capture a lot of data and follow standardized processes. So that's a lot of data-centric views, decision-making, and availability of data to understand, make decisions, diagnose, and fix problems. And then the third thing is, you can use systems easily to create more transparency, which again generally leads to better governance and reduced corruption. So these are three most important aspects for me, at least, in terms of how technology can improve processes, discretion, standardization, data across the system and the process, and possibly leading to transparency. Now, the more important part is, how will this data on transactions and processes be used by decision makers to monitor the performance of that particular stream of service delivery or institution or office, and what's going to happen if performance standards are not met. And unless that loop closes, governance, or for that matter, corruption, will not improve just because the software has been introduced. So it's really important to place everything in a broader context of how governance is conceived and implemented, rather than just how technology is introduced in a system.
Right.
You're on mute.
Yeah, thank you very much for your answer. So I will move towards the audience in case if you have any questions you can pose. We are already 50 minutes overdue. So I asked Umar for 1 hour and it's already 1 hour and I think 15 minutes. So if anyone has any question, you can pose the question. Otherwise, we can formally conclude the session. So I can leave for like 30 seconds. If you have any questions, you can raise your hand or you can type it down on the chat. Otherwise, we can move towards the closure. Right. So I don't see any questions being posed. So I would formally thank you, Umar, for taking time out and for accepting the invite. It was a sheer pleasure to have you on board. I'm sure the young researchers must have learned a good deal from your critical comments. And also from your responses drawn from your expertise and from your practical experience. With that being said, I formally thank you again for being present with us today. And I also thank all the young researchers for taking time out and for sharing your research experience and your learnings with us today in this session. So with that being said, Okay, so please take care of yourselves and good luck for the remaining part of the session, and take care of yourselves and of people around you. So yeah, thank you once again, Umar.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Wonderful to be here, and good luck to everyone. Stay safe.
Okay, take care. Bye bye. So for that, I'm formally ending the call.